Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm going to continue the series What If Deku Was Protected by MHA Girls Part 2. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
Izuku began Monday morning feeling as though he had an additional burden on his shoulders. He discovered the Les Paul guitar that Kyoka had given him was over him when his eyes opened. After practicing until late, he had neglected to put it back in its case. Grinning, he picked up the guitar and put it back in its case. He smiled as he saw the little note with Kyoka's doodle before putting it away. He grinned and said, "Time to do my best today too." "That's the spirit." Himiko's abrupt voice caused him to leap away. The girl's perpetually flushed cheeks teased him with a smile. "Himiko, what are you doing under my bed?" Izuku looked at the girl incredulously and said, "Well, the guitar of Kyoka was already taking space in the bed. The three of us wouldn't have been comfortable there, so I took a pillow and some blankets and made a fort under your bed." With a worried Inko Midoriya, the door to his room opened. She was standing beside Izuku when she grinned and pointed beneath the bed, saying, "Izuku, I can't find Himiko and, lady, what are you doing here?" Even though the girl appeared proud, Inko questioned how sane she really was and how much she was acting. "I made a fort under the bed of Izuku. No need to thank me, there are no monsters under his bed." A mystery was Himiko Toga. The two teenagers nodded and made their way to the kitchen. "Well, since you two are already awake, let's have breakfast." Inko simply grinned as she noticed how much more activity there was in her house now that Himiko was there. She grinned as she remembered how much her boy was loved while she gazed at the guitar case in Izuku's room. Aizawa was handing Nezu the documents for the trip to the rescue environments in the principal's office. He dropped the stack of papers in front of Nezu, who chuckled and said, "Done." The completed paperwork was in a different pile on Nezu's desk. "Efficient. I was honestly thinking this would take you longer." Time meant that he made Hizashi and Nomori work on the paperwork because, in his own words, it wasn't hard. "I had time. Do you want this to succeed? Then assist me in filling out the paperwork." There were groans and insults. On the other hand, they worked over the weekend. He even had the opportunity to tell them about his Sunday observations. It goes without saying that Hizashi felt deceived. With tears in his eyes, Hizashi said, "We are best friends. How could you not invite me to the art exhibit?" When Midoriya and Yaoyorozu's date was mentioned. "It was work," he said plainly enough. Nomori said, "Not cool, Aizawa, you shouldn't let your work wife alone like that." The two men exchanged glances before glaring at her. Hey, indeed, he desired to regain it on Nomori. Later, he would have to figure out how to exact revenge. According to Nomori, at least he was aware that Hizashi had his pants and his back. It was imperative that he exact revenge on her. He nodded and then recalled, "Well, Aizawa, I think you also need to speak to Vlad King about getting the students ready." Nezu nodded while continuing to work on the paperwork. "I got to see my students early to explain them about it." Aizawa was upset and asked, "Then why not send Hizashi to help? Isn't he your husband?" Because he was aware that Nezu wouldn't make fun of that? Nezu nodded, his gaze never leaving the papers. Husband? Work husband. In the final days, Aizawa's list of enemies was getting out of control. He would definitely need a restful vacation soon, away from Nezu and Midnight. When he realized he had included Hizashi in his vacation concept, he moaned. Even with his high level of intelligence, Nezu was unable to decipher the reason behind Aizawa's early morning moans. At the train station, Monoma and Izuku were conversing. He and Monoma had to wait in the station because a villain attack had blocked the bus's route. They were discussing their weekends. Knowing the shy boy's response, Monoma grinned and said, "Izuku, it sounds like you had a good time. However, you had a busy weekend, so I'm sure you would have enjoyed some alone time." His smile made Monoma laugh. "Well, I didn't mind it. It's nice to spend time with others." Monoma's thoughts were simple. You would say that, of course. Monoma noticed a girl from his class nearby before he made a playful comment. He shouted, and waved at her. "Hey, Tokage." Izuku turned to face Monoma. He noticed a tall girl with dark green hair that appeared to fall over her shoulders before becoming wavy. She exuded confidence and flashed her pointed teeth in a smile upon seeing them. "Oi, Monoma. How is it going? Who is your friend?" she said as she smiled and approached them together. Monoma put his hand in Izuku's shoulder and grinned back at her. Izuku nodded at the girl, and Setsuna Tokage grinned at the sight of Monoma. "I am good. This is Izuku Midoriya, one of the few A-class students I like." "Izuku, She is Setsuna Tokage. As Monoma let go of Izuku, both boys' faces flushed in shame. Oh, is this your secret crush? Pony spoke. You were forbidden of getting close with? Hey, I already clarified that to them. He is my friend, I have the right to see him, and I like girls. Setsuna laughed. She grinned as she walked up to Izuku and put her hand over his shoulder, saying, "Oh, don't be like that, Monoma. Love is a wonderful thing. I am actually jealous you have a cutie like him." When she saw Izuku's red face, she laughed and said, "What do you say, Midoriya? Ditch Monoma and choose me. I promise I am a much better company." She left her arm dangling beside Izuku as she left. When he saw that her arm was still beside him but detached from her body, she was trying to frighten him. She enjoyed the thought of surprising others with her peculiarity. She didn't anticipate the awe and fascination in Izuku's eyes when he realized what was going on. This time, she was embarrassed by the sudden outpouring of praise for her and her peculiarity. Amazing. Can you separate more than your arms? Does it needs to be a full body part? Can it be only an eye or finger? How much distance can exist between you and the broken limbs? He was saying in a hurry. Instead of running, Monoma put his arm over her shoulder and walked beside her. Monoma smiled at her, displaying his sadistic side. "Oh no, you don't. You were teasing me, now is your turn to get teased, and know the best part?" He grinned, understanding that although she exuded confidence, it was quite different to be praised by Izuku. He is being 100% honest. You can't fake that amazement and wonder, how does it feel to suddenly be under so much praise? When Izuku referred to him as his hero, he had passed out. Even though he knew it was a fool's errand, he loved every moment of watching Tokage's red face as she attempted to soothe Izuku. Izuku was unable to stop. After all, he loved oddities. Everything seemed wonderful to him. The three of them boarded their train shortly after, and Monoma had tricked a few boys into sitting next to Setsuna and Izuku. She was the most incredible person in the world, much to the dismay of Setsuna, who was making a concerted effort to remain calm beside the boy who saw her. But she wouldn't lie. The way he viewed her pleased her. She wasn't accustomed to it, though. She would undoubtedly be fine with it occurring frequently. A boy violently grabbed Izuku as they arrived at the school. Izuku was preparing for the customary explosion when he said, "Deku, what do you think you are doing?" However, he was taken aback when he heard someone speaking up for him. Bullies were not tolerated by Setsuna Tokage, who said, "Oi! Leave Midoriya alone, otherwise I will have to kick your sorry ass." She didn't like them because her teeth had initially made her a target. She gained confidence and learned how to kick the ass of anyone who attempted to harm her again. "Oh, hear that, Deku? This girl thinks she can beat me." Katsuki fell face first as he began to move forward. Izuku tripped him by placing his foot next to him, but he was unaware of it. It didn't bother Izuku that Katsuki was bothering him. "Leave her alone, Kachan," but he refused to allow him to disturb others. Bakugo Katsuki was furious. He was tripped by the person he considered inferior. He got up and prepared an explosion. Then he felt something stab him in the shoulder. He instantly spun to blast anyone who dared to touch him. He saw a floating hand making a peace sign at that moment. He heard the girl who had just threatened to kick his ass say, "Made you look." Needless to say, Bakugo was struck squarely in the eyes by a solid fist as he turned to face the girl toward the direction of her voice. The lights went out as the punch sent him to the ground. With a laugh, Setsuna gave her own hand a high five before putting it back on. Then she offered Izuku a hand as they walked side by side. "Need a hand?" she asked, grinning at the expression in his eyes. Her efforts to bring him up were minimal. Meanwhile, Bakugo was unconscious and being carried by Monoma into a clump of bushes. He shrugged when Setsuna looked at him and questioned what he had done. Izuku couldn't help but laugh at the moniker Monoma gave Bakugo. "We don't want people to wake Goldilocks from her nap. I am just making sure no one wakes him up as they walk to the school." Setsuna gave Monoma a sly smile and a nod of approval. As they walked into the school, she grinned and said, "Good thinking, Monoma. Now let us go. We got our own classes to be in." She noticed that she was drawn to Izuku as they made their way to her classroom. She simply enjoyed the calm atmosphere the boy exuded. He reminded her of Reiko, a classmate. "Hey Midoriya," she prodded his arm, forcing him to turn away, but he smiled when he saw her hand floating. He saw a floating head when he turned back to her. Her head was detached from her body, and she said, "I guess I lost my head." Izuku couldn't help but laugh. The way he laughed pleased her. She enjoyed making him laugh. She put her hand and head back in their proper positions. She gave him a smile and then extended her hand. As he took her hand, Izuku blushed a little at her smile and confidence. "Can I call you Izuku?" she asked. She nodded and said, "Yes, sure, you can call me Izuku." "Good, you can call me your heroine, or idol Setsuna." Izuku laughed, and Setsuna relished every second of making him laugh. Shortly thereafter, Izuku excused himself and proceeded to his class. Nato Monoma, who had witnessed everything, smiled as he walked up to Setsuna. Setsuna gave Monoma the same smile, her piercing teeth adding to the menacing look. "So, lost your head? I would say you lost your heart and Midoriya is holding it." As Setsuna walked to her desk and flicked her hair, she surprised Monoma by saying, "Oh, and what if I did?" After sitting down, she turned to face Monoma with a smile on her face. She smiled as she thought about how much fun it would be to tease him too. "Maybe I do want to keep him close. Izuku is cute, and did you hear him laugh? I could sure live hearing that laugh every day." Monoma let out a sigh. Setsuna blinked when she heard, "You were going to chat with Itsuka about it though." She didn't anticipate hearing that response. "Kendo? Why?" Monoma sighed. "Itsuka." He grinned when he realized he had an advantage over her and said, "Tokage. You are up for a fun story." Izuku heard a cry of, "What?" coming from Class B as he was making his way to his own class. It must have been all right. After all, Monoma and Setsuna were present. Tsuyu Asui was seated at her desk when he walked into the classroom. She waved to him and he waved back, saying, "Midoriya, good morning." She appeared content. He gave her a nod and asked, "Had a good weekend, Midoriya?" He contemplated whether he ought to elaborate on his actions, however, Tsuyu simply nodded in return before continuing. Izuku blushed when he said, "I've been wondering Midoriya, do you like Yayorozu or Jiru?" Tsuyu nodded in agreement with his implicit response. When she asked, Izuku found his voice once more. "I see. Your interaction with them last week showed that. Is it because they are pretty?" Tsuyu nodded, then got up to go up to Izuku. "No, I mean, they are pretty, but I like them for who they are. Not because of their looks." Tsuyu's eyes stared directly into Izuku's, demanding an answer. "If Kyoka's face looked like mine, would you still consider her pretty?" She received a straightforward and assured response. "Yes." Without hesitation, without hesitation, without hesitation, he said what he truly believed. Izuku had no taste for appearances. He saw individuals for who they truly were. Tsuyu nodded at Izuku after noticing that she was slightly flushed with this. He grinned at her and said, "I see, thank you Izuku." He felt his cheeks flush a little when she called him Izuku. When he heard her speak quickly, he said, "You are welcome Asui." "Tsuyu. You can call me Tsuyu," she said as she turned back to her desk, her gaze shifting from him to the window. Unaware of Tsuyu's thoughts, Izuku grinned and left for his place. "He's not bothered by my appearance." Hizashi paid Class B a visit and explained that they would be spending time with Class A once more, but in a rescue setting. 13, the space hero, would accompany them. Some were thrilled about the exercise, while others were thrilled to see their favorite Class A member. Others were even more thrilled because they were 13 fans. At this, a girl in particular was grinning broadly. Perhaps she could spend time with Izuku once more, Setsuna Tokage thought. She was obviously taken aback when Monoma told her about Izuku's predicament. "I'm shocked that nobody joined in on the fun. Did they not think that she might want to participate as well?" Itsuka handled it well, and Izuku said she would most likely cheat by taking more time, while Pony and Kanoko appeared a little envious of her desire to join the group. Reiko reassured the girls by refusing to do so. She recalled why she most admired Reiko and Itsuka during moments like those. Nezu was explaining to Mirio and Tamaki how the rescue exercise would proceed. Najire was paying attention as well, but her attention was on the fact that she would be spending time with Izuku. The other two had to pay closer attention because they knew she wouldn't really pay attention. While Tamaki sighed before speaking, Mirio grinned and said, "It's really easy, just do what you would normally do and enjoy yourself." Nezu turned to smile and asked, "What about our classes?" "I saw your grades, trust me, you deserve the rest, you got to make the most memories while you can. Once the school year ends you will all be outside working as adults. So enjoy this rest really." Mirio grinned and nodded. The sudden rest didn't seem reliable to him. There was something happening. He simply had no idea what was happening. Many changes were in the works for this year. They were visible to him. Najire and Mirio appeared unable to focus on the impromptu plotting that was occurring. He could see it, though. He simply failed to understand the plot. Classes took their place, and passes for the rescue exercise tomorrow were completed. Now, it was all about getting some rest. Many people rest. Not for Nezu, though. He had a play in the works. The Prince of the West's eyes gleamed with determination as he said, "Princess, I know I may not be what you were looking for, but please, my heart beats for you only from the moment our eyes met." He gave the princess happiness even though he was aware that he didn't come from a wealthy kingdom. "Prince," the princess's voice broke. Her obligation to her nation and her irascible emotions, which were roaring like a fire and demanding freedom, were on opposing sides. The prince of the neighboring kingdom laughed, and the princess was speechless. The opposite prince laughed, but the prince of the land of the West eyes refused to back down. "Ha! Do you think you can make the princess happy? With what are you going to make her happy? Only fortune can bring happiness." They gleamed brighter, if anything, as he prepared for battle. With lion-like bluster, he declared, "Then let us duel. Whoever wins is right, and the one who is right shall have the hand of the princess." When she saw that the Prince of the West was prepared to risk everything for her, the princess broke down in tears. "Prince, don't." She wanted to avoid a hand fight. All she wanted was for everyone to be happy, but it didn't seem like that would happen. Because of the princess's intense love, the two princes were prepared to battle for her hand. "Nezu. What are you writing?" Toshinori's voice interrupted Nezu's flow of inspiration. "Ah." Nezu attempted to hide his work, but Toshinori's long arms were able to seize one page. "Ah, a play? So you are writing the play for them? I thought you would choose something already existing." Nezu let out a breath of relief. Toshinori pointed to the open door and said, "You scared me, Toshinori. Yeah, I am making the play. Why didn't you knock my door?" Toshinori grinned as she read a few pages and said, "I knocked. Many times too. You were too invested in the play, it seems. I honestly never pegged you for one for romantic plays." The headmaster nodded in response to his friend's compliment, saying, "It's really well done. I am impressed, Nezu." Before departing, Toshinori grinned at him and said, "Thank you. Hopefully, it will be great by the end. Now, if you don't mind, I would appreciate you didn't tell the others of this." He wanted to discuss this with Recovery Girl, but he said, "I won't tell anyone, who may use that information for their own purposes." She cherished romances. There was a larger than usual crowd for lunch on the roof today. The wall made up of Tamaki, Mirio, and Monoma encircled Izuku as he sat. The girls in the roof were Kyoka, Momo, Itsuka, and Najire. Reiko, Setsuna, Kanoko, and Pony were preparing the food. The boy was talking among himself, and the girls were talking among themselves. Only because Monoma had gathered the men quickly and told them to have a conversation had this roof management been possible. If not, the girls would have engaged in furious combat over Izuku. Itsuka looked at Monoma as if to warn of pain. He pointed to Kyoka and Momo, who were talking to each other about what had obviously been a date during their weekend, but his smug smile persisted. Itsuka was careful not to interrupt their conversation. Thus, she permitted Pony to do so. "You two went on a date?" Pony asked, grinning at the startled girls who nodded despite blushing a little. They were at a loss for words when they revealed that they had gone on a date with the same man. It appeared that they would not encounter many issues with that. Grinning, Itsuka Kendo approached them and brought 2 plates filled with food. The tool of a hero and a martial artist was intuition. "If I were to venture a guess, you two dated the resident adorable student in your class." Additionally, Itsuka's instincts, which she had honed through hours of physical training, had not yet failed her. Momo was trying to come up with a good reason. Kyoka was quicker, though. When both girls saw Kanoko laughing, Momo thought she would be in trouble soon. "What if we did?" she asked. The 2 pupils from Class A were perplexed. "Ah, they're cute. They also like to share him." Najire, however, was the only one who heard everything. You had a date with Izuku before me? Not fair. I invited him this Friday?" A war council would undoubtedly be held for both Class A and Class B for the most part, anyway. Izuku was holding Setsuna's head. She surprised him and the other guys by winking at him and saying, "Hey, seen my body? Is tall and rather beautiful." "Ah." The girls realized that Setsuna was actually standing there, pretending to be with them the entire time, after spotting her surreptitiously spending time with Izuku. The girl was cunning. The school day ended, and they would be participating in a joint exercise in the rescue zone tomorrow. Remarkably, Izuku was walking home by himself today. Monoma excused himself, stating that he had a crucial appointment. At least he believed he would be traveling alone. "Izuku. Hey partner." Hatsume's excited voice reached his ears. Izuku gave her a quick glance and waved as she bounded faster with excitement. Izuku was embarrassed when she extended her arm to give him a side hug and asked, "How is my husband doing today?" Mei nodded and pulled him along so they continued to walk. "Husband?" she said. She smiled mischievously as she said, "Of course, you are going to be a parent to my babies, remember? Nezu told you too." Izuku relaxed, realizing what she meant. Then he became aware of something. Mei laughed and ignored the remark. "Oh, your face looks clean. You didn't work in the workshop today? It's good I got to see you. I made you this," she said, pulling a pair of gloves from a bag behind her. In black, they had a simple appearance. He thought he recognized them. "Try them on," she exclaimed with the enthusiasm of a child who had brought their report card full of excellent grades to their parent. She looked at him with a smile. Izuku followed instructions and thought the gloves were comfortable. Mei Hatsume then clutched his gloved hands in excitement. "We match. I knew the gloves would look good on you. Good thing I made them a perfect fit." Izuku was taken aback. For starters, the gloves were made to order. It was a good touch. However, there was also the underlying fact that Mei Hatsume was sufficiently aware of his hand size to make a pair of gloves for him. But then again, it was a well-meaning present. She grinned broadly as she rambled on about the technical details of how she made the gloves, saying, "Take it as an engagement band. A functional one too. They got extra padding to protect your hands whenever you hit anything." Izuku found himself blushing and grinning at her because it was so clear that she had made the gloves with his safety in mind. However, it only confirmed his suspicions when he questioned why she did them. In the center of the station, she proudly and loudly exclaimed, "I just want you to be safe, of course. What kind of wife would I be if I let the father of my children get hurt?" It was astounding how many people turned to stare at Izuku and Mei. Others regarded them with disapproval, questioning how a girl so young could become pregnant so quickly. When the attractive girl expressed how much she wanted to protect her boyfriend, others became envious. They couldn't be parents, surely. Others, such as a couple of elderly married people, nodded at Izuku and said in a whisper that he should be grateful for his devoted girlfriend. Some even came to give him a pat on the back, telling him that he should be proud of making his girlfriend so happy that she would shout their love so bravely. Others, of course, said they were just two embarrassing individuals. Mei screamed again, embracing Izuku tightly as Izuku tried to explain that it wasn't like that. Mei continued to boast about Izuku's abilities, which made him a good husband and parent. "Don't you dare speak that way about him. I will let you know he always makes sure I am well," she said. It goes without saying that all he wanted was for the train to arrive sooner. As Mirio nibbled on some of the okonomiyaki Tamaki was carrying, Tamaki's side, he gave some to the new visitor at Tamaki's house. "So, why are you here again?" Tamaki asked, glancing at Monoma as she thanked Mirio and took one of the okonomiyaki. Both boys nodded as they turned on the living room screen. "Itsuka brought me into this mess. I honestly don't know what I am doing here. Do you guys want to watch a movie or something?" they said. The girls were in Tamaki's kitchen, chatting while choosing a movie. Pony, however, was chatting to inform the others about the terms of the agreement. By the end, she grinned and clapped her hands, saying, "So Izuku agreed to have dates with us, and try the idea of us being in a loving relationship." By the end, Kyoka was laughing. Momo looked at her in alarm and said, "So, Izuku is that smooth, Kyoka. As Kanoko and Reiko were taking cookies out of the oven, this only made her laugh harder. As Reiko nodded, Kanoko grinned and said, "Izuku is really nice. He is not one to go for looks. He likes people for who they are, and that is lovely." Apparently utilizing the cookies in some way. Momo and Kyoka were seated next to Itsuka. She glanced at her senpai, who nodded, and said, "But we all agreed to share him, and he was okay with it. I believe Najire is also in." As she recalled their Friday date, she grinned and said, "I am all for sharing. Izuku love is immense. She would also get to see him tomorrow." The Class A girls appeared to nod. Momo said formally, "Well, if Izuku is okay, I am okay with it." Kyoka laughed. Every girl in the room nodded, with the exception of one who was scratching her head. "She is all for it, trust me. Plus, I prefer us getting with each other instead of fighting. The dork wouldn't like us fighting over him." Tokage's Setsuna was thinking. Itsuka blinked in response to the question. I don't mind, but would it be bad if I got another girl in this plan?" She was aware of Setsuna's lack of friends. "You surely don't mean them, do you? I mean, they don't seem that open to this sort of stuff." Setsuna grinned and nodded. "I know they may not, but if they were to spend time with Izuku I am sure they would like the idea. Plus, I would like her especially to be happy. Itsuka gave a nod. She was aware of her intended recipient. A kind of comrade in arms and Setsuna's best friend. Itsuka brought a calendar with a drawing of Najire on Friday and a picture of her on Saturday. You can try to talk with her, now there is something important we need to cover. Date order. The thing that makes us different from animals is our ability to schedule, so who wants a date with Izuku? We need to schedule. Chaos ensued. Tamaki was startled to hear footsteps approaching them during this chaos. Reiko was the one. She nodded and set down a plate of numerous cookies, saying, "Oh, hello." However, many of these cookies caught their attention and appeared more enticing. Tamaki noticed that the cookies featured images of Izuku, Mirio, Monoma, and himself. The Izuku cookie was especially good. They also observed how she positioned a pair of cookies, one featuring a ghost and the other a heart, next to the Izuku cookie. In the food, Tamaki deduced the message. Reiko nodded and asked, "You want us to help you get a date with Izuku?" Monoma laughed. "So these cookies are bribery, Reiko?" Reiko told them to keep quiet while gesturing with a finger. Mirio nodded and accepted the plate. "We accept." Monoma and Tamaki gave him a look. They are both talking simultaneously. Mirio said, nodding, "We do?" His eyes were blazing with willpower. Before speaking, Tamaki remained silent. As a firm believer of love, it is my job as a master matchmaker to make sure girls get their dates. Mirio took the cookie and bit it gleefully, nodding. "I thought we were helping Najire." Tamaki exclaimed, "We do, but we also help anyone who looks for love," while Monoma simply shrugged and accepted Izuku's cookie. Tamaki glanced at Mirio and said, "Oh, Izuku is a chocolate flavor." Mirio asked with a smile, "What was your cookie?" When Tamaki chose to bite into the hard cookie, he was taken aback. "Chocolate too. I am guessing Reiko filled all with chocolate." Reiko grinned and said, "Oh, strawberry jam." She is serious. It was forgotten by the boys that she was still standing beside them. She picked up an Izuku cookie from the plate, gave it a gentle kiss, and then bit it. She grinned. Izuku would likely be sweeter than chocolate, she knew. For now, though, this was sufficient. No one had noticed when Reiko wrote her name under Wednesday as the girls battled for the date with Izuku on the calendar, shielded by Itsuka, Momo, Kyoka, and Najire. Mei Hatsume was working in a suit for Izuku while the war council was taking place in Tamaki's home, where he was still perplexed as to why they had picked his location. When she gave him a hug, she had taken his measurements. She had taken a lot of measurements in that tight hug to make sure the suit would fit him. There was nothing very fancy about it. When she took him to work with her in the workshop, he was wearing a suit to keep him clean. The last thing she wanted was for him to get covered in oil. She grinned as she gazed at her image on a metal plate. Prior to carrying the gloves to Izuku, she had cleansed her face. And he had seen it, too. She was still unsure of the cause of the sensation in her chest that she experienced when near Izuku. However, she didn't really give a damn about its name. She enjoyed the feeling, and she knew that ignoring it would be foolish. In relation to which, she produced a tiny screen that displayed Izuku vitals for her to see. Since she could only see his vitals because he was still wearing the gloves, she grinned and said, "Pulse well, you reached your home safely, you are relaxed too." She pulled a sketchbook from among the metal objects scattered throughout her room, and her smile grew. She began working on an image of Izuku very quickly. The sketch was completed quickly. This sketch differed from the first one because Izuku's image was inside a gear, and the gear next to it featured her face. She grinned as she felt a wave of ideas come to her and she started working before she forgot them. "Oh Izuku, you just make things move so easily. Sleep was only for the weak." Izuku was sitting in his bed, practicing the guitar once more while wearing the gloves. Himiko was with him at the time, peeking her head over his shoulder to watch him play. As Izuku practiced, Himiko relaxed to the sound of the guitar. "Setsuna I like how she punched Bakugo. Her hair is really as green as yours." Izuku nodded. "Yeah, though hers isn't curly. Hers is wavier, sort of goes down straight then it waves." Himiko was chuckling. Izuku nodded once more, saying, "She sounds pretty." When he heard Himiko giggle, he stopped playing this time. "Ah, don't stop playing Izuku. I like hearing you play, plus I want to hear more of Setsuna." "Think she will visit us? She doesn't sound like Momo, so will she come to pick you up in a motorcycle? She sounds like a badass." Izuku's cheeks were red as he kept playing again. As time passed, he could hear Himiko's laughter gradually fading as she went to sleep. He settled her into a comfortable bed and set up his guitar. He thought that perhaps he could go and use the guest room as Himiko took over his bed. Until he looked beneath his bed. The pillows and sheets are still there. He climbed under the bed out of curiosity and asked, "How comfy is your fort?" It goes without saying that Izuku was so exhausted by the day's events that he fell asleep in the surprisingly cozy fort Himiko had built beneath his bed. A school director was working tirelessly on his masterpiece somewhere else. The Western Prince. He has come to meet the princess, who is said to have a heart of gold and love, as the prince of a distant kingdom with little wealth. This princess has been approached by the prince. A maiden greeted him as soon as he stepped into the kingdom. She gave him a quick glance and a gentle wave. She had captured the prince's heart. He made the decision that he would marry this woman. The princess wasn't necessary for him. Love was what he needed. However, life is full of surprises, because shortly after, a man with a lute laughed as he approached the girl. He heard the bard and turned to face the girl, whose cheeks flushed red at the friendly bard. "Princess? Still in the market? Don't you know the prince will come today?" he asked. The bard laughed and said, "Don't remind me, why father must make me marry a prince?" The princess's voice and manner captured the prince's heart. The man smiled sorrowfully as he said, "Well, princess, the king only wants the best for you. Did he conceal something from others?" "But I just want love," the prince said decisively as he approached the princess. The bard stepped forward, protecting the princess behind him, but the princess still glanced at the stranger, her eyes glimmering with wonder at this stranger she had never seen before. "If it is love you are looking for, please, let me show it to you," the bard asked, glancing at the stranger. "And who would you be?" But the stranger's gaze was fixed on the princess's. "My name is Itsuka, Prince of the West," Nezu called out in a fit of laughter as he visualized the plot of the play. He'd make this play come to life. Not just the general public would be won over by the play he had been creating. However, the critics as well. It would end up being the greatest. A bit of kindness and love. Nezu, the principal of UA. Typically, one class at a time made the trip to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ. Primarily because moving so many people was an expensive experience, but it also required a lot of paperwork and approval. Aizawa was consequently compelled to hire 2 additional teachers for every class. In other words, he was one of 4 teachers on the bus. Nezu believed that by providing more supervision, he was helping him. "Yo, aren't you excited, Aizawa? This is a vacation pretty much." He sighed and felt Hazashi's tight side hug. Namori and Midnight poked Aizawa from the seat behind them and asked, "Pretty much, how hard is to keep the children safe?" Ken Ishiyama, Cementos, was sitting with Midnight, his arms crossed, saying, "You two should behave. Aizawa already has a hard time with this many students. We must help him." Nezu sent an adult to watch over the 2 kids he was looking after, and Aizawa was grateful for that. 2 kids who were too old to be considered kids. He was in dire need of a vacation. As they gathered in their small groups, the students were ecstatic. Pony wanted to go with Class A, but the girls of Class B were working together to keep him there. She wanted to see Izuku, but they needed to maintain order, so she asked, "Keep calm, would you?" Furthermore, she shouldn't rush at him because it would look bad. Reiko was holding Kanoko in place when Itsuka said, "Yeah. Look at Reiko and Kanoko, they're taking it pretty well." As she noticed Setsuna talking to her friend, she sighed, "Okay, only Reiko is taking it well." Black-haired student Yui Kodai exclaimed, "Yui, we got to talk." Her hair barely reached her shoulders. She appeared at ease and solemn. She nodded upon seeing Setsuna. She was taken aback when Setsuna put her arm over her shoulders and asked, "Setsuna, how can I help you?" Knowing exactly how her friend was feeling, Yui Kodai sighed, "I was hoping to help you in helping yourself." Aizawa was conversing with the big 3 of UA at the time. After a long moment of staring at Najire, he sighed and said, "Just do what you usually do. Relax and enjoy it." Najire thanked him and hurried off, saying, "Go. We both know you are dying to go see him." His attention was on the other 2 teenagers. Aizawa pointed to Midnight and Hazashi, who were reportedly discussing ship operations with Cementos, and said, "I believe I can count on both of you to be responsible adults and help me care for those children." This surprised Mirio and Tamaki. Mirio quickly grasped the hidden meaning, while Tamaki forgot that the USJ had multiple boats. Tamaki said, "We can do that." Mirio nodded and grinned. He added Tamaki, who grunted at his friend's strength, to her. "Absolutely. No one can stop Lemillion and Saniter," he said. Aizawa and Mirio nodded in agreement. "And Najire, she went for Izuku, didn't she?" There was no need for words to describe it. As he removed Tamaki, Mirio chuckled and said, "Someone tell me she didn't go to bite Izuku. Better visit 13 once more before they miss the opportunity to say hello properly." As he was being hugged tightly, Izuku wondered if he ought to have said Nejire to loosen up the embraces a little. "Izuku." She laughed and spun him around. Kaminari and Mineta felt a little envious. More specifically, Mineta couldn't figure out how Izuku had gotten a girl like that in just their brief time together at the school. What was happening? Why didn't he receive a gorgeous woman? Why did Izuku also have attractive classmates? Mineta was about to scream in anger at the injustice when he found himself losing consciousness. She had used a staff to knock Mineta unconscious, causing Momo Yaoyorozu to shudder and everyone else to watch her. "Why did you do that?" the class's boys inquired. She couldn't understand the sudden impulse she had. "I don't know, I just felt so creeped out." Although Mineta was struck by Momo, the other girls in the class felt the same way. Actually, when Momo struck Hagakure with the staff, he was already preparing a surprise attack. Izuku took the shorter boy and nuzzled him while Nejire continued to embrace him, ignoring the incident. Her voice was earnest as she said, "Aw, I missed you." Some of the guys in the class thought it was strange, but others, like Kirishima, found themselves giving him the thumbs up because of her sincerity, which made Izuku blush. He smirked and nodded at his own statement, crossing his arm. "Oi Izuku. Is it not manly to make a girl miss you? Take responsibility," he said. Nejire looked at Izuku expectantly as he flushed. Izuku hadn't done anything wrong, in her opinion. She didn't mind a compliment from him, though. Nejire grinned and gave him a tighter hug, saying, I am missed you too." Kirishima smiled and gave Bakugo a shoulder pat. Bakugo was really thinking about hurling Kirishima away. "That's manly, He looked at a floating hand making a peace sign as he felt a poke in his shoulder. A direction was indicated by the floating hand. He saw a girl without a hand waving at him as his gaze followed the hand. With a menacing grin, she gestured to him that anything humorous he did would cause trouble. Recalling that he desired a rematch with her, he grunted. Izuku and Nejire had just released their embrace and were both talking endlessly about the USJ at this point. The rest of Class A was taken aback by this exchange because they never thought anyone could follow Izuku's meanderings. Surprisingly, it appeared that Nejire was actually sharing more information than Izuku. Ochako and Kaminari were drawn to Tsuyu's voice as she said, "They are a sea of rambling." Ochako's kind response was, "Well, I guess. I mean they are excited." Was Kaminari's response not more nuanced? "They're nuts." "Oh, they are simply sharing knowledge, providing each other with a broader view for this exercise. Izuku Midoriya never stops to impress me with his analytical prowess. Always a step ahead." Iida was simply observing what he wanted to observe. Momo and Kyoka just grinned at the sight. They had to acknowledge that Nejire had a certain allure that prevented them from even considering getting upset that she was stealing Izuku's attention. They received a quick overview of the USJ's operations as soon as they arrived. Now, Cementos will be taking care of Group A in the urban environment, Midnight will be with Group B in the forest environment, Present Mike of Group C in the ship scenario, Aizawa will be taking Group D to the mountain environment. After 13 minutes you will rest for 5 and rotate to the next scenario until you've been in the 4 of them. Any doubts? 13 asked politely as Hizashi giggled about ship, until he received a cement elbow to the gut. An explosion sounded as this was happening, and everyone turned to see a crowd of people hurrying by. Cementos wasted no time in erecting floor cement walls to impede their progress. The unexpected portals that appeared caught him off guard. A man composed of mist said, "Pro Hero Cementos. Such a bother, wasn't there supposed to be only one teacher here?" As Namori and Hizashi prepared, Aizawa adjusted his goggles. Hearing Hizashi's voice, Aizawa recalled, "Villains. How did they know we had this exercise today?" Before he turned in his paperwork for the joint exercise, Nezu said, "Aizawa, did you move my paperwork?" Nezu nodded and said, "No, I dislike it." The statement, "Someone seems to have taken a peek at my files," would require Nezu to investigate. He glanced at the portal's hazy figure, who appeared to nod, and said, "Nezu said someone entered his office and peeked at the paperwork. That was one big gambit you played there." "Indeed. He even seems to have found a way to block my portals of working in your school after that." Aizawa cracked a grin. High Specs had a strong personality trait. Nezu was able to pick things up fast, adjust to whatever he suspected would happen, and plan accordingly. The madman must have been expecting someone to walk into his office. In actuality, Nezu was more afraid of someone looking at the play's manuscript than he was of the school records. In order to safeguard the office and the school as a whole, he prepared a variety of measures. When used properly, high specs was a powerful quirk. Fear was another major motivator. A young man with a hand over his face sighed. Hisashi grinned and said, "Whatever, more heroes means he will have to come faster when they are in danger." Hisashi focused on letting out a scream that startled many of the villains after saying, "Oi, I believe you are not really considering you have 4 pros right now." "Ha ha ha," he exclaimed, laughing as his peculiarity came to fruition. While using his quirk, he had taken care to avoid being close to the students. Cementos immediately began trapping the cement sediments by lifting them off the floor. Iida was swiftly pursued by Aizawa. "You're the fastest, Iida. Go at the school and tell Nezu about this. We will make a distraction for you." Iida smiled at him. Aizawa pointed to the 3 students who were approaching with solemn expressions and asked, "What is the distraction?" "They are." Aizawa examined the top 3 University of Arizona. Mirio grinned at all the bad guys. He spoke while maintaining his attention on the enemies nearby. Najire and Tamaki nodded, saying, "You know what to do." Power. Mirio sprinted right away and ended up plunging to the ground, where he appeared to phase out, shocking the other pupils who were being held together by Midnight and 13. This startled the villains because Mirio appeared behind them and knocked them without hesitation. A shockwave pushed the young man with the face covering away as he attempted to grab hold of it. No touching. Najire and Tamaki had noticed that the young man appeared to have caused the hole in the wall. So they got it right away. It was wise not to touch him. When this occurred, the mist-shrouded figure became frightened and swiftly brought so many portals that enemies and allies were sent everywhere. The real chaos was beginning. Within the USJ, alongside Cementos, Yui Kodai, Itsuka Kendo, and Tamaki, Kirishima and Izuku ended up. The last person to speak is the first. As everyone nodded, Tamaki inquired, "Everyone is okay?" Cementos observed their location. "Urban zone. We got teleported us randomly. Otherwise, he wouldn't send me in a zone full of material for me to use my quirk with." Tamaki grinned. Cementos nodded as he forced the student to remain in the group, saying, "He entered in panic when Najire threw his ally away with a shockwave." "Well, we better go back to the middle, hopefully." Iida managed to run. "We must regroup." Villains attempted to target them as they began to move through the city, but they were swiftly eliminated due to the peculiarity of Cementos being enhanced in an urban setting. With Tamaki in the back and Cementos covering the front, the students were constantly on guard. Itsuka approached Izuku as they were walking because she could tell he was anxious. Izuku nodded and relaxed, realizing that there was no point in being overly anxious. "Relax. There are pros in the top of the UA in here. Have faith in them." If that were the case, he couldn't give it his all. "Thank you, Itsuka." He discovered that he could articulate her name without faltering. Behind Izuku, Kirishima observed the girl's communication style. After hearing Kirishima nod, Yui Kodai said, "So manly, that girl is manly." Indeed. Kodai was aware of the princely tendencies of Itsuka, but she had never seen them in action before. She didn't feel let down. She also noticed that she was grinning at the boy who went by Izuku. She observed the way Itsuka gazed at him and his flushed cheeks. Now she knew something. The boy was liked by Itsuka. She couldn't help but smile because she thought the scene was so cute. A tiny part of her wondered how difficult it would be to get the boy to blush. The same way with her. In the meantime, Kirishima was remembering his idol while he saw Izuku, Red Riot. Bakugo frequently disparaged Izuku. He was seeing someone who was making an effort, though. To me, having a manly heart means living a life free of regrets. He grinned and decided that he would have to discuss Izuku with Bakugo later. 2 things occurred in the ship zone. The first was the electrocution of villains in the water. Monoma was mimicking the other boy's quirk and cursing at being thrown into the water. He would recall Setsuna's action. Present Mike's scream was causing the villains who weren't in the water to endure excruciating pain. He gathered everyone after the villains were defeated. He gathered everyone as they were moving away, saying, "Come on kids, I am worried of Eraserhead being alone." He did this quickly. He gave Suyu a look. Before she could respond, Setsuna came up and asked, "Can you use the rope to bring out the kid who electrocuted the water?" She chuckled as she considered how much fun it would be to see Monoma. "Leave that to me." She had witnessed how the other boy ended up after releasing his electricity. She liked the thought of seeing a stupid Monoma. Hisashi hoped Nomori and Aizawa had it as easy as he did as the group continued to move. In actuality, Nomori, Midnight had it very easy. In the end, she put the villains to sleep with her quirk if theirs didn't protect them. After ensuring that the situation was diffused to allow the remaining students to leave and return to the center, she grinned. She said, hopefully those two have it easy, as some students questioned her about her concerns regarding Cementos. What? Why would I worry? Pretty much the majority of the area has cement for him to work with. If he got into the urban area he probably already trapped everyone else. I am more worried about Eraserhead and Present Mike. Most of the students were with Aizawa, Eraserhead, while Bakugo and Todoroki had frozen and blasted most of the small fries. He let out a sigh. I hope Midnight and Mike have it easier. In various locations, the three educators said the same thing. The three former friends hoped the other was okay, saying, they would be in troubles without me. For some strange reason, Cementos felt a sense of loneliness. Izuku asked Cementos, Professor? Are you well? And he sighed. I am not sure. I feel so alone all of a sudden. Izuku gave the professor a back pat. He had no idea what could happen to Cementos to make him act in such a way. Shigaraki Tamura was standing in the middle ground following the shock that knocked him to the ground. Kurogiri assisted him in standing up. There weren't supposed to be so many people here. What do you want to do? The people you gathered are most probably defeated already. Our plans were based only in Eraserhead. We didn't consider so many heroes, Tamura sighed. Kurogiri nodded, but paused for a second. I know, let's get Nomu and see if we can raise the kill count here. Tamura grunted and sighed as he pulled out Nomu by opening the warp gate. You are sure? He asked. The heroes had regrouped as the monstrous figure emerged. This made Tamura smile. He was counting the people he had previously seen as he said, oh perfect, we don't need to go looking for you anymore. He heard something moving behind him and was thrown away after being punched. Wait, 3 are missing. Kurogiri was pushed away by a shockwave before he could respond. Mirio glanced over worry-free as Shigaraki attempted to touch him but was able to pass through him, saying, actually only Tamaki is missing. The rushing creature that did push Shigaraki away was avoided by Mirio, who grinned and said, permeation. Awesome, right? That is bullshit. Shigaraki exclaimed, shocked that someone would have such a peculiarity. It essentially rendered his null and void. Mirio smiled and motioned for Nejire to return, saying, no is my quirk. Mirio defiantly stood before the 3 villains. I would prefer it if you simply gave up and let my juniors finish their classes. Mirio's eyes were determined, and his posture was devoid of any flaws. Shigaraki was furious when a portal opened to take him away because of this. Wait. Rather than carelessly losing their weapon, Kurogiri would have rather kept it and saved them. As they left, Mirio grinned. At that moment, the roof collapsed, bringing down All Might. As Hizashi and Nomori reassembled as their customary trio, Aizawa nodded and said, my apologies, Ida told me and, is it over? Cementos felt strangely alone once more until he noticed 13 and the other students standing next to him. All Might grinned when he said, I think we should give the students a recess. He was relieved that not much had occurred. When Nezu arrived with reinforcements, the professional heroes were chatting among themselves. He was pleased to see that everything was swiftly resolved. Unexpectedly, no one was hurt. However, the remaining villains needed a lot of cleanup. The students formed groups and began conversing while this was happening. Nejire and Mirio are getting a lot of praise from their juniors. Tamaki ate with a sigh. He was taken aback when Izuku sat down beside him. Tamaki raised an eyebrow at the statement, you were great, senpai. With his head, Izuku denied, I didn't do much, Izuku. Tamaki felt compelled to eat a bowl of ramen in order to conceal his face from Izuku's admiration, saying, you were keeping us safe together with Cementos, you also made sure we didn't separate, and you were always looking out for us. Tamaki had some understanding of Izuku. He was someone who appreciated every aspect of hero work. In addition to the ostentatious behaviors, he recognized the significance and weight of seemingly insignificant chores. Thanks. Both were taken aback when Mirio's face materialized in the center of the floor. With a smile, Mirio said, you two are bonding. That's great, as Nejire arrived to take Izuku away. She said, bond with me. Tamaki already has Mirio. Which shocked Mirio and Tamaki once more. Did she believe they were dating? They were best friends. It's not the same. A group of girls tackled Izuku to the ground in an attempt to further surprise him. Setsuna, Kanoko, and Pony. Each with their own goals. Kanoko and Pony were concerned about Izuku's health. Izuku, are you well? They didn't hurt you, right? They asked. Setsuna had a different opinion. Reiko approached him slowly and simply kneeled beside him. Yo, Izuku. I took a picture of Monoma, you need to see how dumb he looks, she said. He was drawn to her voice and saw the concern in her eyes as she asked, Are you well? He smiled as he nodded. The girls all turned to stare at Tamaki, who briefly felt threatened, and said, I am well. Tamaki and Cementos kept us safe. He was their senpai, 3 years more experienced than they were, and an intern who was always fighting in the streets alongside a pro hero. He was still capable of experiencing fear, though. However, he was taken aback by the grateful smiles he was getting. Thank you, senpai. Hearing all the girls say, thank you, made him feel a little ashamed. Mirio grinned and gave his friend a side hug as he emerged from the floor in his costume. Tamaki grinned and nodded when Mirio said, I told you, you are more popular than you believe. I guess. Nejire was able to give them both a hug. The trio nodded in agreement as she said, we are the big three, remember? And turned their attention to watching the girls embrace Izuku. They observed how Momo and Kyoka also walked in search of Izuku, grinning upon seeing him. Kyoka joined the group hug right away. Mirio spoke, but Momo wasn't sure how to get in. His friends nodded and said, she still needs to relax more. Then a girl's screams were heard. They saw her horns and pink skin. Please let me join the group hug. She yelled at the crowd, who was able to sustain her extra weight. Tamaki was the one who spoke this time. Nejire nodded and got to his feet, saying, there you got a girl who is relaxing way too much. She walked with both friends by their hands and said, well, I am up for the group hug. Oi, Tamaki didn't want to be among so many people, but Nejire forced him to stand in front of them all, leaving him with no choice. As soon as someone said, hey, everyone, why not hug your senpais? The girls and a few others rushed to give them a hug. Mineta was encased in a mixture of Aizawa bandages and Cero tape. They both had no idea why they had trapped him. They simply thought it was appropriate. Tamaki was both elated and strange. As he used his quirk to escape, Mirio decided to say a prayer for his best friend. Mirio grinned as he observed the group hug in progress and said, ah, such a beautiful scene. He couldn't help but laugh when he realized that 2 people had left. That girl acts as if she was a ghost. Neither Izuku nor Reiko were in sight. Reiko. The girl had taken Izuku a little further away from the group hug where they were all celebrating their accomplishments. The gray-haired girl embraced him before he could ask any questions. The hug was returned by Izuku, who said, I was worried. After a moment, she broke it, putting some distance between them. Izuku asked in surprise, tomorrow. Can I pick you up? He was going on a date with her. Despite his confusion, he couldn't help but nod. It will be good, I promise. Izuku saw that Reiko was a quiet person. She didn't talk much. He was taken aback by her ability to convey so much in such a small amount of words. He smiled and blushed, saying, thanks, Reiko. He'd had to get it several times. However, Reiko's willingness to talk to him was what made her so kind. She said nothing. She thought there was no point in talking and preferred to be silent. Nevertheless, she decided to say a few words to him, those unique words that she simply didn't say very often. It was unique because of that. She decided to tell him. Reiko's hand moved to Izuku's flushed cheeks as she saw them. Izuku, she said softly, interested in what made his cheeks flush. She was taken aback when Izuku embraced her. Then Reiko got it. The embrace was sufficient response. She gave a gentle hug in return. The hug was conveying a very clear message. Words cannot express how much you mean to me. Your deeds speak louder than words, and I appreciate the words you share with me because they sound much louder in the quiet of your care. They also have a lot more significance. Clearly, Reiko said, tightening the embrace. Every word is worth it for you. Every time we embrace, hold hands, or gaze into each other's eyes, you are worthy. I want to be with you at every moment. Snipe was watching Reiko and Izuku embrace from a distance. Adorable. He was astounded by the beauty of the silent hug scene. There was no need for words. For those lovers. While hiding among trees with Aizawa, Hazashi, and Nimari, Toshinori Yagi was silently grinning at Izuku. The final one with a handkerchief in hand. Midnight had witnessed a lot of dramas, but she had to concede that this kind of quiet romance had its own allure. They don't need any words to express how much they like each other. Hazashi's statement, I am rooting for Nejire still, caused Aizawa to nod. Nimari pointed at them as Hazashi nodded, saying, she offers a more stable future. Toshinori Yagi was just grinning and asked, "Are we seeing the same lovely moment?" He was happy that he could witness Izuku's happiness. He never had any kids. However, he had to acknowledge that he felt a sense of pride as a father watching his son grow up in Izuku. It was strange, but by no means undesirable. Did a father feel that way when he was proud of his kids? After the cleanup was finished, the pupils were returned to the school so that everyone could return home. The students were appreciative that luck and the heroes had prevented any problems. This time, Izuku was making his way to the station when he heard footsteps and recognized Itsuka. They walked in silence, and she waved to him. Itsuka just walked up to Izuku and clasped her hand in his, calmingly providing a hold that helped him unwind. Izuku nodded as her cool voice said, "Crazy day, right?" Itsuka nodded and said, "Yeah, but nothing bad happened today." He blushed a little when she said, "I was worried about you trying something you know. I know how much of a hero you are." "Thanks," she said with a smile that drew him nearer. Izuku was taken aback when Itsuka put a finger to his lips and asked, "Mind if I drop you at home?" She said with a confident smile, "I am not getting a no as an answer." He blushed as he agreed with her suggestion. The walk to his house, the train ride, and the journey to the station. Izuku Midoriya's hand was never released by Itsuka Kendo. Itsuka did nothing but hum tunes to songs Izuku didn't know but thought were nice during the silent trip. Itsuka grinned as they arrived at the Midoriya residence. He was surprised to see that the normally cool Itsuka was blushing a little when she said, "Nice place, Izuku. Would it be okay for me to pick you up on Saturday? I would like to take you to have a fun time. Especially after today." Izuku began to nod. Itsuka surprised him by drawing him near to her and giving him a gentle peck on the lips. Itsuka waved to Izuku as she walked away, saying, "It's a date." Himiko Toga and Inko Midoriya gazed at the brief glimpse of Itsuka leaving in the sunset. When they watched Itsuka leave, they both made sure to rub their eyes because they thought they were witnessing a prince leaving a princess in her house. As she went outside to bring Izuku inside so he could tell her everything she had said, Himiko was able to pass the illusion effect more quickly. Nezu was sighing as he filled out the day's paperwork at the school. But when he looked at the two framed photos he now had on his desk, a tiny smile appeared on his face. One showed the students embracing the Big Three, Tamaki, Mirio, and Nejire, dressed as heroes. The girls from classes B and A tackled Izuku Midoriya in the other. He laughed at the absurd scene and continued to work happily on the paperwork. He was going above and beyond for them. The pupils would grow up to be heroes. Their lives would constantly be in jeopardy. They would have erratic schedules, work full-time jobs, and participate in the intense competition. He had to ensure that they enjoyed their time at school as a result. In order for them to examine the past and state, "I recall how enjoyable those times were." He looked at the Big Three's photo once more. "This play is about Prince Itsuka. I'm sorry, Nejire." He sighed and continued working, unaware that someone had heard his voice and made the decision to check that play. The headmaster decided that a few days of rest wouldn't harm the students, even though no one had been harmed and the pro-heroes and the school's top 3 students had managed to keep things to a minimum. To be fair, it would be difficult to expect students to return to normal after an attack. Thus, in an effort to assist the pupils, he allowed them to rest for the remainder of the week. Students like Izuku and Iida sighed at the thought of having basically 4 days to rest, even though some students enjoyed the idea of an easy week. While Himiko was learning the fine art of cooking from Inko Midoriya, Thursday had just begun, and Izuku was already letting out another sigh as he worked on some sketching. Inko's voice was quiet, but her eyes showed that she was serious when she said, "Just stir the mix like that, no rush, take your time and relax as you do it." Toga's life had not been easy, but she was accustomed to being scrutinized and under pressure. However, Inko Midoriya's gaze was different. She dared to say that it was a mixture of hope and expectation. She did her best to make a cake mix by following the directions, even though she didn't really understand them. It goes without saying that she felt she was doing a good job because of Inko's little nods. She was able to have brief conversations with Izuku, who was seated nearby in the living room, even though her main focus was on obeying directions. She said, concentrating on the mix, "Izuku, I swear if you keep sighing you are going to pass out at the lack of air in your lungs." Although she loved Izuku, she didn't like the boy's melancholy or disappointment. He responded succinctly but thoughtfully, continuing to sketch. Sorry. He was sketching a group of the school's top 3 pupils. He wanted to practice shading with a particular focus on Tamaki, and he felt that the shadows theme was appropriate for Tamaki. The image's main focal points were Tamaki, who appeared as valiant as the others in the shadows, Mirio, who shone like the sun, and Nejire, who was the sky hovering over both. Getting all three characters to stand out in the drawing was a real challenge. His sighing was actually more a result of his inability to express it clearly as he was thinking about it. Ever since he first met the tree students, the piece had been on his mind. However, he only now had enough free time to put in the mental work necessary to work it out and make it a reality. However, it was proceeding as smoothly as it had for the 4 hours since he woke up, as Toga could attest to. He required a diversion. He required additional assistance. He needed a little inspiration. As she went to answer the door, Izuku's thoughts were interrupted by Inko's voice, going. This time, Toga let out a sigh of relief at being ignored while mixing for once. Toga, Inko, and Izuku were surprised. It was Reiko Yanagi who had knocked on the door, wearing blue jeans, a long jacket with buttons on the side, and casual attire. The light-colored jacket contrasted with her hair, giving her a rather fashionable appearance. With her hands hanging to the front and her elbows close to her body, she appeared uninspired and uninteresting. Aside from her hair appearing more combed, she appeared as usual. In contrast to Izuku, who was wearing casual attire, jeans, and an All Might t-shirt with the words, Plus Ultra. Displayed proudly in his hero's colors, she was clearly dressed sharply. Reiko's voice was formal, with a faint smile on her face that was barely noticeable to strangers. Hello. My apologies for the inconvenience on your day of relaxation after the events of the previous day, but I was in the hopefulness that you would be in the positive assessment of an outing to enjoy the flowing of celluloid pictures. Izuku had heard about this aspect of Reiko but had never had the opportunity to witness it. Reiko had two moods, as Monoma had mentioned. Complete silence or complete jargon. Since no one seemed to understand her, she frequently remained silent. Inko was attempting to comprehend what she had just heard. Toga's brain had just exploded, so she made the decision to hide in the kitchen's interior before she ruined the mixture and infuriated Inko. Meanwhile, Izuku noticed that he was nodding. He said without hesitation or anxiety, I would love to go to the movies. His mind was more preoccupied with the outing than with the fact that a girl had just asked him to go to the movies with her, primarily because he had hoped for a diversion from the drawing. When Izuku said he would go out with Reiko, Inko was still in disbelief. From inside the kitchen, Toga simply wished him a good day. Reiko simply nodded before following Izuku outside. Even though Reiko was walking with her arms draped over Izuku's shoulders, she still felt content as they did so. Who didn't understand it? Reiko. He stammered once more at the intimate contact, especially since they were walking to the bus stop and were receiving strange looks from onlookers. As they walked, she said simply, haunting you. She maintained contact with Izuku at the bus stop, and he remained silent while blushing and Reiko simply breathed rhythmically. Strangely enough, both were happy with the circumstances. Izuku because the strange, calming contact diverted his attention from his anxieties. Reiko was simply happy to spend some quiet time with someone she was interested in. In addition, the prospect of going to a movie was thrilling. Even though they were nice, her friends weren't the best companions for movies. Monoma was noisy. Monoma was always chopped by Itsuka. Yui, Kanoko was fine. She didn't enjoy horror films. Hirayu was overly solemn. Furthermore, Pony was simply too jittery. She hoped she could go to the movies more frequently with Izuku as company. But then again, in the movies, she wouldn't mind if he was frightened or noisy. That was how love operated. In actuality, that was the primary reason behind her most recent excursion. The two arrived at the movie theater in a short amount of time. Reiko surprised Izuku by pulling out a card, and the staff member just nodded before grinning at her. The employee's last words were, and here I was wondering if we would be seeing you today. The marathon is going to start soon, when he saw Izuku standing next to Reiko. He arched an eyebrow, then returned his attention to Reiko. Brought a new victim Before Reiko received a pair of tickets and started to move through the movie theater, Izuku had little opportunity to ask questions or even to respond to what the employee had said. Reiko spoke before Izuku could respond to what the employee had said. She allowed herself to say, with that incredibly subtle smile that few could notice, I arrived to the movie theater multiple times during the year. Even more so during the season where they play a marathon of movies. Before she led him to the room where the movies were being shown, Izuku was grinning himself. The Ghost Festival. Izuku's face turned pale as Reiko's faint smile emerged. The girl appeared to enjoy her movies as much as she did. As if it were a horror film. It goes without saying that throughout the entire film, Reiko was so happy that she felt compelled to verbally communicate her feelings to Izuku. She said in a monotone as she continued to watch the film, Izuku trembling in terror at the ghost on the screen, "I must admit, this is quite the joyful occasion. I was expecting the enjoyment of celluloid film would be good. But the feel of your embrace around myself is quite the interesting development too. I must admit to quite enjoy it," she said in her familiar monotone, but with a hint of humor as she felt Izuku's arms embracing her. "I thought you wouldn't mind ghosts, Izuku." I, Reiko said, and although he was embarrassed to acknowledge it, he didn't have to. Izuku blushed in embarrassment but refused to let go of Reiko, who chose to return the embrace. "Being afraid is normal. I love ghosts. They aren't real, even if they were. Real life and movies are different from one another. The point of the movie is to scare you, which mind you, is doing an excellent job of doing. I care for you, Izuku Midoriya." Reiko gave the frightened young man a quick peck on the cheek, which caused him to flush for yet another reason. Izuku saw a ghost descend into a vacuum when Reiko gestured to the screen. Reiko grinned. Izuku might concur, saying, "See, even a horror movie has fun bits." Even in his current circumstances, there were enjoyable moments. He found himself embracing Reiko, but he decided that was enough and let her go. He was surprised, however, that he was unable to break free from her. The girl shushed him and asked, "Reiko." She had sidestepped the question by saying, "Movie is still going on." She was fully aware of what she was doing. "Let us enjoy the movie, shall we? When two people are deeply in love with one another, they have children. It doesn't get any easier than that." Therefore, it was only natural for Mei Hatsume that her love of inventions would lead to the birth of children because she was so passionate about her work. Thus, Mei had the extra thought of Izuku while she was taking care of her infants today. She knew she should be sleeping, and they had some free time before classes resumed, so it was a problem. "So why don't you give him a call?" Later, Izuku was taking a phone call. "Hatsume." In an attempt to sound formal, he asked, "My dear, how are you today?" Red in the cheeks from being called darling, Izuku stammered on the other side, but he recalled that was essentially how Mei behaved. Mei made her plan public before he had a chance to ask any questions. "I wanted to go out. Would you mind spending some time with me? Please don't abandon your wife." Her speech was something Izuku would never get used to. After traveling to the station and taking a ride, Izuku was lounging on a bench and taking in the peace and quiet of the area. It felt good to sit and unwind there because it was close to a park. Breathe deeply and relish the quiet for a moment. Eep. He became startled when he felt a chill on the back of his head, and then he heard a girl he knew well laugh. Mei. The girl had a couple of cans in her hands when he turned around. She asked, "Soda or coffee?" with a pleasant smile that Izuku had to acknowledge was different from her typical smiles. She appeared relaxed, or at least that's how he understood Mei to be, as he could see that she was examining everything with her eyes. "I will take the soda." She sat down and patted the spot next to her after he thanked her and accepted the can. He opened the soda and sat down. While sipping her coffee, Mei remained silent. She gestured around them, saying, "Is nice, right?" Izuku noticed why he thought Mei looked different as he took a moment to look around. In addition to not wearing her goggles, she had no visible signs of oil or dirt on her face. She also wore jeans and a t-shirt, which were casual outfit choices. She appeared relaxed. He wasn't any different, though. The two appeared perfectly normal. That's how it felt, too. Izuku pondered whether this was the sensation that accompanied simply spending time with friends, enjoying the moment without worrying about anything else. The feeling of having good friends had begun to grow on him. "Hey," Mei said first, interrupting his train of thought. "Sorry if it came too out of nowhere. I was working but felt I needed a break with you." She demonstrated that she was the type to tackle things head-on by expressing herself in a straightforward manner, which did not surprise Izuku. "As fine, Hatsume." Hatsume, PFFT. You can refer to me as your darling, wife, honey, or the love of your life because we are essentially married. Before Izuku called her name, she continued to list cutesy terms that only made him blush. Mei works much better than Hatsume, darling. Even though Izuku was having trouble understanding the girl next to him, It felt good to just hang out and do nothing. Soon after they had finished their drinks, Mei joined Izuku by the arm. "Come on, darling, I need you to see something." The girl started running with excitement, and Izuku kept up with her despite not really knowing where they were going. In a strange way, this was enjoyable and soothing. Izuku soon found himself in an arcade, and before he could inquire as to why, Mei took him to a game that featured 2 guns. "Come on, loser pays for food." When Mei abruptly began the game, Izuku felt anxious. It goes without saying that he made a fatal error by competing with Mei. It was impossible to defeat her. She then took him to play table football and air hockey, but each time Mei forced him to try a game, the outcomes were the same. She prevailed. He didn't mind that she had won. Actually, he was just taking pleasure in witnessing her happiness, laughing a lot and showing him things he had never really tried. To be fair, he wasn't usually active on this kind of stuff because he used to spend most of his time by himself. It's not as though he had previously attempted to persuade Bakugo of such a thing. Furthermore, Mei was just being herself. She was only doing all of this because she wanted to see Izuku. However, she was also acting for a very basic reason that she was unaware of. She didn't just like Izuku for the sake of having children. Like the guy, though. She was doing things her way, though, and didn't really understand the conventional notions of romance, the manner in which she could comprehend and adhere. And it was easy, because there were times when doing things primarily consisted of doing them out of pure desire. She might have said something along those lines on the phone. "Let's leave." She wanted to say something more like that. "I'd like to accompany you." For one day, Izuku Midoriya wouldn't be a hero, he wouldn't be All Might's successor, he wouldn't be a boy who cared for multiple girls, and he wasn't a UA student. Mei Hatsume may not actually understand what she truly wants, but her actions clearly demonstrated it. Therefore, even though Izuku felt they were just hanging out, he could sense that Mei cared for him. He was just a young man today, out with a girl who took care of him. They were merely 2 cogs in a machine that ran smoothly and without concern. Simply flowing and cooperating effectively. And that was Mei's true talent for Izuku, the capacity to promote relaxation while maintaining interest.
So this was the end of the series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, bye bye.